Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend. Welcome to Life Stuff, everyone.
Welcome, welcome.
We have a special guest today.
Hmm.
We haven't had a guest in a while. And this is a guest that I have met while working at Industry Bar. And his name is Cisco. And he has quite a story to share, I think, about his life recently. I'm not going to give it all away. I want to let him share most of it, but it's about sobriety and therapy and life, life and stuff.
All right, well, let's get him on.
Da, 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 da.
Da, 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 da. Can you see me?
There is Cisco.
Yes, here am I. Today is actually day 37 of sobriety. Like complete
Congratulations.
sobriety from everything, from alcohol. I was never really into like weed or anything like that. But when I say I'm completely sober, I am completely sober. And I kind of wish I would have done it sooner, but
So, Cisco, you kind of said what the almost what the punchline is, but so take it from the top. Like, what's your story and how did you get to where you are now, which sounds like a very good place.
I mean, I I come from a large Puerto Rican family. My mother's from Puerto Rico. My dad is from here in the Bronx. They had myself, my brother, my sister. My brother passed in infancy, so it's just my sister and I. And I think, sort of growing up with the cultural norms of like the Latino culture, which is very much like machismo and a man is a man and a man is who he is, I sort of realized early on that I'm kind of not like what I'm supposed to be, like who my uncles are, who my father is, who my cousins are. And I did so much to like overcompensate and to sort of like ward everybody off my scent and like have them not suspect anything, that by doing that, I developed a lot of really bad habits. I was a very angry kid. I was a very combustible, temperamental teenager. I would lash out at people. I would get into fights. I would, if somebody even looked at me and was like, oh, that's gay or you're a faggot or like anything that was like slanderous in terms of like being a homosexual, I was like a firecracker. And, you know, I, I really put my parents through the ringer. I really put them through the ringer. My dad grew up one of six. He never knew his father. The streets raised him. My mom is the oldest of six, and she was sort of like a second mother to her siblings. And her father, my grandfather, he was not around. He drank. So they grew up really fast. And when they had us and they were raising us, they did an amazing job and they did the best that they could. But you can tell that there were areas that they were kind of, we don't know how to handle this, we don't know how to really navigate this. And having a son that, after I came out, they told me that they had suspected that, maybe I'm gay, maybe I'm something. And I always thought that they were going to just hate me and disown me, especially my father. He is like the typical alpha male, like hot-blooded Latino man from the hood, into sports, into you know anything that you can think of. Like, that's my father. He's like a great man, but I was so scared of how he was going to react. And he and I butted heads. I mean, I was just a terror, skipping school, cutting class, getting into fights. My mouth was just crazy and my temper was crazy, but I realized that I was just so angry because I was afraid. I was like, everybody is saying this about me and I'm not ready to admit it about myself. And I hated that everybody knew what it was before I was even okay with accepting it for myself. And I remember when I came out, finally, like I had blurted it out at dinner, by the way. It was so like dramatic. It was ridiculous. It was so dramatic. We were at Bonefish Grill. We had just flown back from Las Vegas. We went on like a family trip to Vegas for my birthday. My mom and I's birthdays are 3 days apart. So my sister and I went to see Jennifer Lopez's Vegas residency, and my parents went and like did their thing, you know, with the two of them. And when we flew back, we're at dinner, like straight from the airport. Everybody's tired, everybody's jet lagged, and I just remember like blurting out, like, "I'm gay." It was just because I couldn't take it anymore. Like I couldn't take it anymore. And I remember I had told my sister before I decided to tell my mom and dad. And my sister, she's so funny. I was like, "Christina, I have something to tell you." And she's like, "What?" I was like, "Oh," I was like, "I'm gay." And she looks at me and she's like, "We flew across the country to see Jennifer Lopez for your birthday. No shit."
So when you actually accepted it, they accepted it, like as this progressed, that moment of letting them know, had you already accepted it in yourself, or?
So I think that I could not hide it anymore. And I had to say something, but I was still accepting it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I was so worried about what my father was going to say, how he was going to react. And, you know, when I came out, he was so accepting and he was so kind and gracious. My mom was too, but I think my mom needed to maybe mourn whatever vision she had for me in her mind as her son, a wife, you know, kids, a family. And she had a harder, I don't want to say she had a harder time accepting it because she said that she knew, but I think once I said it out loud and it was a reality, she had to process some things, you know. Is he going to get hurt? Is somebody going to harm him? Is somebody going to attack him? You know, and we come from a big city where certain places in this city, you know, you can walk down the street in a dress and heels and have a beard thicker than mine and nobody's going to say anything. But, you know, in the South Bronx, it's not so common to see that. And, you know, I'm not a parent, but I'm sure as parents, they have these worries in their heads, you know, and then you take into account the cultural aspect, you know, how are other people in the family going to react? How is my grandfather going to react? How's my grandmother going to react? You know, is anybody going to say anything? And, you know, I have some relatives where it's kind of like a don't ask, don't tell thing. And I have other relatives who are just like, you know, we don't care. But I know that when I came out and I was 26, 26 when I came out. I had a lot of damage to undo that I had caused within myself, within my relationships with, you know, my parents, you know.
Did you
And
start to become less angry?
I
That
started to become less angry. And I think that in becoming less angry, I had to really sort of maybe go back and start processing and dealing with everything that sort of led to me being like, you know, I sort of felt like I was finally like at 26, I could start living my life. I could start being myself. I could stop pretending and I can stop overcompensating. And I feel like it's a full-time job when you try to hide who you are and you try to throw people off of your scent, if you will. And I just know that I look back on my adolescent years, I look back on my teen years, and I know that I could have handled so many things so differently and avoided so many problems had I just trusted my parents.
right.
And that was my own fear. You know, you see the news and you read the papers, and then you know, you grow up in a culture that's very much traditional in the sense of like the man rules with the iron fist and what the man says goes, and you have to be like the dominant force. And I have an aunt who became a born again sort of Christian, and my cousin, her daughter, is a lesbian, and she just treated her horribly when she came out, and I would see that and I would be like, oh my god,
Worse.
yeah, like what's gonna, she kicked her out of the house, and they had a whole thing. And even just in the culture, like, I go to the barber shop with my dad to get my hair cut, and like, the barbers are talking and they're like, oh man, don't be gay, like that's like, stop acting like a faggot, like, you hear these things on a daily basis, just like walking down the street, and you're just like, oh man, what's gonna happen, like I can't be like this. And it's sort of just like eats you from the inside out, and
Yeah.
you start numbing yourself with whatever you can find, whether it's drugs, whether it's sex, whether it's alcohol, whether it's all of the above, whether it's dangerous behavior, shopping, gambling, whatever that outlet is, you lean on that. And as I got older, just ignoring it wasn't enough. Just distracting myself with like my studies or friends or whatever, it wasn't enough. Then I started drinking. Then I started, experimenting with, other types of substances. And when I realized that alcohol was the thing that just made me forget about everything, I was like, yo, say less.
But this was before you came out. You started doing this stuff.
My early 20s, yeah, but even after I came out, ironically, my drinking got worse.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Because then I was sort of like left to figure out how to clean up this mess on my own.
Did you think about therapy then, or that wasn't an option?
So I went into therapy in 2015. I started therapy, and I remember the psychiatrist that I saw at the time diagnosed me with generalized anxiety disorder and depression. I used to have insane panic attacks. Like if my mom was on this call right now, she could confirm that. I used to be like a teenager, and I used to like not be able to sleep. I would feel like I was having a heart attack. Like it would just hit me at the most random times. And like my mom would be up with me during the night and be like, what's going on? Like, what's wrong? And, my father, who would have to get up early to go to work, would be like, are you okay? Like what's wrong? And I used to just blame it on issues with kids at school. Oh, I hate school. I don't want to go to school. And I used to downplay it. And that anxiety manifested itself and into physical symptoms as I got older. And once I came out, yeah, there was a weight lifted off my shoulders, but then the real work had to start, and I ran from handling that.
So I have a question for you, just to go back a little bit. So it sounds to me like the biggest fear was accepting it yourself.
Yeah.
And then, then there was your parents to tell your parents, which you had a lot of fear about, but it seems like you had more trouble, again, accepting that you were gay.
Of course.
So then
Absolutely.
you were projecting that on everything in your life, right? So then so then you told your parents, and again, so you're continuing the story about like all these things that you ended up doing. Now, why did it get worse for you? I mean, had you really not accepted it even after telling your parents?
I think I knew who I was. I knew I was gay from a very young age. From a very young age. But I think because of how I grew up in terms of the bullying that I endured with, people that I went to school with and people that I grew up with, I honestly, and it took a while for me to accept this, I think a big reason why I was so pissed off was because I was like, damn it, they were right. In the midst of all their cruelty and all their heinous behavior and the name calling and the physical altercations, the fact that these people who were so awful to me, they were right. And I didn't want to give them the satisfaction.
They were right that you were gay?
Yeah. Yeah. All the people that used to bully me, like all the people that used to make fun of me, whether it was on the school bus, whether it was in lunch, whether it was in the locker room in the gym, whether it was in the classroom, I took that with me as I kept, growing up and going into adulthood. And then when I admitted to myself, yes, I am indeed a gay man, then there was that voice in the back of my head that was like, well, you know, Francisco, they were all right. All the times they called you a faggot, all the times they called you this, all the times they cornered you in the locker room and, you know, you felt as though you were gonna, you know, have something happen to you. Like the times you were chased, the times you were, you know, you had practical jokes played on you in the worst way possible. These people were right. And I didn't want to, there was a part of me that didn't want to give them that satisfaction of like, damn it, you know, yeah, you were cruel about it, but you were right.
You also weren't proud of being gay yet then.
I think I didn't know what it was to be
Fair.
proud of my homosexuality and my queerness and just being me.
Of course, I mean, being proud of something that you've been told is the devil your whole life is a hard like pill to swallow. It's like that's like literally it's just a different you're going from the bottom of the ocean to the top of the sky. Like
In like 0.2 seconds.
yeah.
And
So
it's
that
like,
takes a minute.
it did take a minute. And it's like, you know, I was always a nerdy kid. I used to like to read. I used to draw. I used to like comic books. I was never really athletically inclined. You know, I loved to like listen to like Mariah and like you know, like all the pop divas. And you know, I was a sensitive kid, and so it made me a target because I didn't act like how I was supposed to act culturally, or you know, whatever society deemed you're supposed to, you know, how you're supposed to behave. And you know, it took a long time for me to really, first it took a long time for me to just say, Francisco, you're gay, and it's time you admit it, and it's time you start telling people. And once I started you know, therapy and working with somebody that was really good at dealing with these types of issues, I really sort of grew into being comfortable with who I was. I loved Francisco. I loved the fact that, like, yeah, I'm a gay man and that there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I'm amazing. I deserve love. I deserve happiness. I deserve safety. I deserve all of these things. But because I had already developed the bad habit of drinking, that didn't stop. And so it was just sort of, okay, you're working through these internal issues. However, there's this one other aspect that you're not really paying any attention to, and it's slowly getting worse.
Right.
Well, I mean, drinking is an addiction, right? It's like
Oh,
smoking. It's like all of these things that people do that, you know, they develop or they just do for certain reasons. Eating. I mean, eating is an addiction.
Yeah.
yeah.
So it doesn't just because you accept whatever the thing is that maybe created that, it doesn't mean it's going to go away. So
Right. And you had been using drinking to numb,
yeah.
to disassociate with the feelings. And even though you accepted some of the feelings, that behavior, like, and drinking is one of those things that like the society deems very cash. And it's
Yes.
like nobody thinks they have a problem ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious, as you started to notice the pattern, like when did it really drop for you? And were there times, now that it's been 37 days, were there actually more times that you didn't really want to believe what you already knew? Or what has been the last, like, the journey of the last couple months?
So, I mean,
sorry, before you answered that, but like, can I just ask a pre-question? Like,
Absolutely.
sure.
how did you get to the point where you said, where you stopped?
So I think once I got accepted into grad school and I moved back up here because we were living in Florida for a long time, I was like, okay, I'm moving back to New York. I'm going to be on my own. I'm out of the closet. I am living my life as an out gay man. So when I tell you, as soon as I got up here, I made up for lost time, baby. I was
Yeah.
out at the bars. I was out at the clubs. I was at the pride parades. I was at the events. I was going here, going there. I was like, oh my God. I had such a sense of freedom in living in my truth for the first time ever, where I could really enjoy myself and be proud of who I am, that I just went, crazy.
And in New York City, I mean, you're just like, you have so much access.
And that's the thing. It's like, yeah, there's gay people everywhere and there's gay clubs everywhere and, whatever. But like, this is like the mecca of pretty much the world. Everybody comes here from all over the world. And, to be here as a kid when you're going through things and then to come back in adulthood, it's like apples and oranges. So I definitely hit the ground running in terms of just not having any self-control, not having any like personal internal boundaries with like, okay, Francisco, like it's okay to take a day off. It's okay to like, hide and reset. Like, no, it literally was like that Lady Gaga clip, club, another club, on top of going to school, on top of working, on top of like having to pay my bills. Like I just completely went haywire. There was no balance. It was either nothing or 100. There was no in between.
And how long did that last? Like, when did you start to realize this isn't sustainable?
It definitely affected my relationship that I had with my partner of a very, very long time. I started taking a step back and sort of like taking stock and saying like, okay, maybe there is some truth to what he's saying. Maybe there is some truth to the things that a couple of friends of mine are telling me in terms of like my wildness. It's actually pretty funny that I'm saying that because the other day, a friend of mine texted me that I hadn't heard from in a while. And he was like, hey, I was just thinking about you. I wondering how you're doing. And we started, texting for like an hour or two. I told him that I got sober, and it's so funny. He was like, you were the most loving, fun, off the wall drunk, but you were wild. And I was just like, oh.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh man. And it's sort of, hearing how I behaved, I cringe, I like do this. It's just like, but I have to hear that. I have to sit in the reality of the fact that like, this is how I was and this is who I am. And, I can't go back and change it, but I can sort of make the now and the tomorrow better than what the yesterday was.
Absolutely. And that's what it sounds like that's what you're really in the throes of now.
It's
really
funny.
The truth of that and what steps need to be taken in order to make that a reality for yourself.
And, in our community, it's like, the social thing to do is to like, hey, let's pick a place in Chelsea or the Village or Hell's Kitchen and, get the girls together and, hang out and everybody's drinking. And it's like, it's the norm. And you've seen me in your bar barely walking out of there, and you've seen how I can, sort of pound them back. But what I have also learned is that a lot of the people that I do associate with and a lot of people that do work in that industry are very aware of people that do struggle with alcoholism and are super supportive.
Yeah.
Super supportive. And I remember
it's an interesting thing for you to like be sober, but also you've started to come around the bar again.
Yeah. And it's still hard, and you know why, and it's difficult for me to go to certain places, specifically the one that you work at, on certain nights. But we had a good conversation the other day because it's like I can't stop living my life and I can't stop enjoying my life, but I have to now sort of maybe pick and choose where I go and when I go and who I go with to avoid triggers or to avoid temptation, if you will.
And these are some of the boundaries that like you as a younger version of yourself just weren't aware were even possible. Like when you come out, there's just so much explosive energy because you've been repressing it for so long. A boundary feels like somebody's withhold you. It feels like you are not allowed to be yourself more. So you almost want to push past that. But this version of a boundary is about protecting yourself and taking care of yourself.
Exactly.
And because you want to live the best life you can live. And in order to do that, the relationship you had with alcohol was withholding you from that.
It really was. And it's like, I would like literally like I feel privileged in the sense of like every time I went out, I feel like I had a mirror because no matter who I was with, somebody was acting like a drunken version of myself.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, I've done that. Oh, I've been there. Oh, I know how that is. And it's like, it still wasn't enough for me to sort of say, okay, you need to stop. But I definitely started after the new year, I started noticing that it was starting to become an issue. Being hungover more and waking up late and calling out of work or showing up to work late or showing up to work and I'm still a little bit drunk, not even hungover.
What was
You
the
know,
tipping point for you?
I think the tipping point for me was everything that happened in quick succession in my personal life. My job had put me on mandated leave because they smelled alcohol on me. So I was like, I pretty much, I'm like, okay, well, I lost my job. Grandpa died. Mom and dad are going through their stuff. I'm fighting with this person. I felt so alone. I felt so misunderstood. My closest best childhood friend, was in Florida. I can't, go see her. Um, and there was a 6-day period. Today is day 37. So then 6 days prior to that, um, I had a really bad panic attack and I checked myself into the hospital.
Mhm.
And it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon and my blood alcohol was like pretty high. And I went into the hospital and the woman, the nurse was talking to me and she's like, what are you doing? Like, it's the middle of the day. It's a Wednesday. Like, do you need help? Like, what's going on? And I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. And, I was having thoughts of harming myself. I remember before I called the Uber to check myself into the hospital, I remember sitting at the park and I was looking at the cars just driving by and I literally was sitting there and I remember saying to myself, if I just walk out into traffic, it'll be quick. And then boom, I won't have to feel any of this pain anymore, any of this hurt anymore, any of this loneliness anymore, any of this ugliness anymore. But once I started feeling those thoughts and having those thoughts, something in me sort of kicked into gear and was like, go to the hospital,
Uh-huh.
check yourself in. And then when, after I sobered up, they had me on an IV. They asked if I wanted to check myself into the psych ward. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm not crazy. Like, I was still in denial.
Yeah.
And then I left the hospital. I went home. I took a nap, got up, went out, and kept drinking. It was like a 6-day bender. And on the 6th day, when I went into the hospital the second time, that's when I knew that something had to change. And I remember going to a meeting in there, and one of the guys said, and this hit me in the face like a ton of bricks, he goes, alcoholism is literally suicide on an installment plan. And when he said that, I was like, holy shit, something has to change.
Mhm.
I can't do this. This has to stop. And I found an AA group that was LGBTQIA plus focused, started going to meetings, got back into therapy. I got a sponsor, and today's 37 days. I got my literature here. I got like the big book and like
Yeah. I mean, how does it feel to actually commit to all these things that you've heard of, known of, and you are in counseling, so you have even more access to what's out there, available options, and yet for yourself, those were never options that are now, you're taking life by a different set of reins now.
I have my good days and I have my bad days. It's so funny. I haven't really spoken to my parents about all of this in detail. If they see this, my phone's gonna be ringing off the hook because they're gonna be like, "What?" They mean well, and I love them to death. They're the best, but like they'll be like, "Really, Francisco? Like you couldn't have
Yeah.
called us?"
Yeah.
um, having to sit in the feelings that you really want to numb out with alcohol and feeling it, oh, that's the worst.
Yeah.
That is the hard part because you have to face that you were not kind to certain people, that you were not good to certain people, that you weren't good to yourself, that you did things and said things that you wouldn't normally do when you're sober and you're of sound mind. And that's why one of the steps is, making amends and reaching out to people and saying sorry. I still have difficulty in knowing that there are things that, as much as I want to like shout from the rooftops, I can't.
Hmm.
I, I,
There's
I,
things you can't control, or what do you mean by that?
well, things that I can't control, like being sort of branded the villain or being branded an awful person when I know what the truth is for certain situations with certain individuals in my life, but because they sort of are waving this flag of like Francisco is this awful person, Francisco is this bad guy, I have to just accept that.
And also accept that a lot of those things that were done that they interpreted as the villain were when you were not of sound mind. Like you were it, likely intoxicated.
And I know that I had limitations and shortcomings due to the fact that I was struggling with drinking and I was struggling with untreated, maybe traumas or issues that I still needed to work through and process that I was just, taking out in a negative way or react, whatever it may be. And, you know, I I wake up every day and I just try to say like today will be a good day. I'm not going to really have any cravings. I'm not going to really have any temptation, but I'd be lying if I say that I don't.
Of course.
I would be lying if
Also
I
know the consequence of where that takes you.
exactly, I'm very surprised at a lot of the support that I have gotten from people that I thought wouldn't be supportive. Um I'm very lucky in that regard. I'm also very lucky in knowing that my family is here for me and I can always lean on them.
Yeah. Chosen
Um,
and biological.
yes, of course. I know that, and I also have to understand that the relationships that I have with people, whether they're good or whether they're bad, whether they've ended or whether they're still ongoing, I know how I was to those people, and I know the truth. They know the truth. I've had people who have come up to me and they said that they've heard things about me, and they've said to me, "I don't believe any of it because you've always been nice to me. You've always been kind to me. You've always been a good friend, and that's the Francisco that I know." So that gives me a little bit of that makes me feel a little bit better, but it's still hard, Justin and Eddie, to wake up every day and know that there are people out there that are hurt by your actions and angry with you and hurt by you.
But Cisco, what I have to say that was your previous life, and all you can do now is move forward and be the person who you are. And if those people, I think you have to let those people go.
I said this to Justin. I can rationalize and make sense of the things that sort of led to my breakdown. People die, people get sick, people go through things. Life is hard. Life happens to everybody, but to have somebody treat you so negatively, especially when you're at your bottom and you're reaching out for help and they slam the door in your face, that's hard.
But you also have to realize these people have their own stuff too. And
Yeah.
this may not be, completely about you. It's their own stuff they're dealing with. And maybe they see that you know, you are getting your life together, and that's maybe hard for them to see that because their life isn't together. I don't know. I don't know what the story is on this person, but
Yeah, and I would never, I would never disclose too much of that because I do want to respect people's privacy, but I can just speak from my perspective. There's, I've already made a list of people that I want to make amends with, and that person is one of them, but that's going to be probably like the person I reach out to last because it's so fresh. But
but that's all you can do. I mean, you know,
Truly.
you start a new chapter, and the bottom line here is the most important thing is you.
Yeah.
And you know, but you know, we need to wrap up soon because
oh yeah, I know. I can
because
ramble. I'm sorry.
no, that's okay.
Well,
But
I wanted to kind of, my last question was going to be what would you say to somebody who's still in the denial phase? Like, of the people that are listening and watching, if somebody found this video and resonated with a lot of what you've said, what could you have said, or what would you have liked to have heard from somebody, or what would you wish you had been told like 40 days ago?
Oof, that's a layered one. I may get a little emotional, but I, it's really true when people tell you that it does get better and this isn't the end. There's a therapeutic technique that we learn in school where it's like if your younger self was sitting in a chair in front of you, what would you tell him or her? And I know that if somebody is out there struggling, it's funny. I was on Instagram like 2 nights ago. I was just like doom scrolling, and I saw this reel where somebody asked Angelina Jolie, of all people, what advice would she give to somebody who's in a bad place? And she said, sit in it, feel it, and push through. Because once you push through, you will see the light. You will see the silver lining. And I think the reason why I numbed is because I thought that I would never see that light. I thought that I would never see the end of the tunnel. I thought that it would just be perpetual chaos and darkness. And for anybody that's out there struggling, if you think you're hiding it, trust me, you're not. Because so many people knew that I was having an issue and never said anything. It will be okay. You're not alone. You're not the only one going through this. And somebody somewhere out there, if you think you're completely alone, you're not. People love you. People care about you, and you're meant to be here. That's another thing. You are meant to be here.
well, and what Justin and I often say on the show is, you know, as we talk about a number of issues where, um, you know, then we say, what do we say to people who are going through the things that we're talking about? And you know, one of the things is you have to get help. You know, go to
And
therapy.
that may look like different things.
Pardon?
And that, I'm sorry to cut you off. And help may look like some different things to different, to everybody. Help for me may not be what it looks like for you or for Justin or forever, but help is out there.
Yeah. Lots of different kinds of help.
But before you get there, I think you need to go through. I mean, you went through a lot, and people say it's not a new thing. You have to reach bottom. And, you know, some people, um, you know, they never get there. But it sounds like, I mean, you got there a couple of times, and then, you know, by the third or fourth time, you're like, okay, like I'm done. You know, I can't do this anymore.
You eventually get, it's true what they say, you get sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Mhm.
And I feel better physically, I feel better emotionally, I feel better mentally, but I don't know what tomorrow may bring. And it may sound so cliche and so whatever, but it's true when they say one day at a time. Just focus on the now, focus on the present. It's a beautiful day. I woke up today, I'm having a great conversation with two great people, and that's a blessing. 40 days ago, I was not like how I am right now. And
Right.
who knows what the next 40 may hold. But, I have a good support system. I have really positive people. I always tell Justin he's one of the most positive people I've ever met. Like, it's contagious. It really is. And I try to now emulate that.
Mhm.
I want to exude that.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to be a cloud of negativity or like a cloud of just like angst and dread. And I'm just really happy that I've made it this far. And, you know, the future does look a little brighter.
Well, that's a good way to end it.
Truly, truly. And it's inspiring, and it just proves that no matter where you're going from, starting from wherever this journey started, wherever it weaved around, like you
Mhm.
did arrive here today, and all you can do is every day reach for these things and this kind of life that you are creating for yourself. It is possible.
It is. It truly is. And, you know, I now have things that are positive things that I look forward to. You know, this is one of them. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be very helpful for me and therapeutic for me in my own healing journey because I'm able to say these, you know, certain things and put it out into the universe.
Yep. Let go
And
of
get
it.
it. And yes. Oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here, Cisco. Thank you for being so brave to share your story. Thank you for opening up and letting
Thank
go.
you. Thank you guys for allowing a platform where anybody can say anything and feel safe and feel seen and feel heard. And like, I could just feel the positivity and the kindness from the both of you. And that's, you know, really what we need more of.
Amen.
Yes.
All
Well,
right. It's great to meet you. Thank you for
No,
coming.
you too, Eddie. This was awesome.
Yeah.
This was really fun.
All
And I
right.
thank you both.
Al,
You
And
guys are awesome. Thank you both.
from New York, from Toronto,
Yes, from the Bronx.
from the
Yes.
Bronx. Until next time, we'll see y'all later.
Bye, guys.
bye.